small beam of white light shone steadily into the left eye of Rachel Rosen, and against her cheek the wire mesh disc adhered. She seemed calm. Seated where he could catch the readings on the two gauges of the Voight-Kampff testing apparatus, Rick Deckard said, "I'm going to outline a number of social situations. You are to express your reaction to each as quickly as possible. You will be timed, of course." "And of course," Rachel said distantly, "my verbal response won't count. It's solely the eye, muscle, and capillary reaction that you'll use as indices. But I'll answer. I want to go through this." And she broke off. "Go ahead, Mr. Deckard." Rick, selecting question 3, said, "You were given a calfskin wallet on your birthday." Both gauges immediately registered past the green and onto the red. The needle swung violently and then subsided. "I wouldn't accept it," Rachel said. "Also, I'd report the person who gave it to me to the police." After making a jotted notation, Rick continued, turning to the 8th question of the Voight-Kampff profile scale. "You have a little boy, and he shows you his butterfly collection, including his killing jar. I take him to the doctor." Rachel's voice was slow but firm. Again, the twin gauges registered, but this time not so far. He made a note of that, too. "You're sitting watching TV," he continued, "and suddenly you discover a wasp crawling on your wrist." Rachel said, "I'd kill it." The gauges this time registered almost nothing, only a feeble and momentary tremor. He noted that and hunted cautiously for the next question. "In a magazine, you come across a full-page color picture of a new girl." He paused. "Is this testing whether I'm an android?" Rachel asked tartly, "or whether I'm homosexual?" The gauges did not register. He continued, "Your husband likes the picture." Still the gauges failed to indicate a reaction. "The girl," he added, "is lying face down on a large, beautiful bearskin rug." The gauges remained inert. He said to himself, "An android response failing to detect the major element, the dead animal pelt. Its mind is concentrating on the other factors. Your husband hangs the picture up on the wall of his study." He finished, and this time the needles moved. "I certainly wouldn't let him," Rachel said. "Okay," he said, nodding. "Now consider this. You're reading a novel written in the old days before the war. The characters are visiting Fisherman's Wharf in San Francisco. They become hungry and enter a seafood restaurant. One of them orders lobster, and the chef drops the lobster in a tub of boiling water while the characters watch." "Oh God," Rachel said, "that's awful. Did they really do that? It's depraved. You mean a live lobster?" The gauges, however, did not respond. Formally a correct response, but simulated. "You rent a mountain cabin," he said, "in an area still verdant. It's rustic, knotty pine with a huge fireplace." "Yes," Rachel said, nodding impatiently. "On the walls, someone has hung old maps. Courier and eyes prints. Above the fireplace, a deer's head has been mounted, a full stag with developed horns. The people with you admire the decor of the cabin. You all decide." "Not with the deer head," Rachel said. The gauges, however, showed an amplitude within the green only. "You become pregnant," Rick continued, "by a man who promised to marry you. The man goes off with another woman, your best friend. You get an abortion, and—" "I would never get an abortion," Rachel said. "And anyhow, you can't. It's a life sentence, and the police are already watching." This time both needles swung violently into his head. "How do you know that?" Rick asked curiously about the difficulty to obtaining an abortion. "Everybody knows that," Rachel answered. It sounded like he spoke from personal experience. He watched the needles intently. They still swept out a wide path across the dials. "One more. You're dating a man, and he asks you to visit his apartment. While you're there, he offers you a drink. As you stand, holding your glass, you see into the bedroom. It's attractively decorated with bullfight posters, and you wander in to look closer. He follows after you, closing the door. Putting his arm around you, he says—" Rachel interrupted, "What's a bullfight poster?" "Drawing. Drawings, usually in color and very large, showing a matador with his cape, a bull trying to gore him." He was puzzled. "How old are you?" he asked. "That might be a factor." "I'm 18, Rachel said. "Okay, so this man closes the door, puts his arm around me. What does he say?" Rick said, "Do you know how bullfights ended? I suppose somebody got hurt. The bull, at the end, was always killed." He waited, watching the two needles. They palpitated restlessly, nothing more. "No real reading at all." "A final question," he said. "Two-part. You are watching an old movie on TV. A movie from before the war. It shows a banquet in progress. The guests are enjoying raw oysters." "Ugh," Rachel said. The needle swung swiftly. "The entree," he continued, "consists of boiled dog, stuffed with rice." The needles moved less this time, less than they had for the raw oysters. "Are raw oysters more acceptable to you than an additional boiled dog?" "Evidently not." He put his pencil down, shut off the beam of light, removed the adhesive patch from her cheek. "You are an android," he said. "That's the conclusion of the testing." He informed her, or rather it, the Eldon Rosen, who regarded him with writhing worry. The elderly man's face contorted, shifted plastically with angry concern. "I'm right, aren't I?" Rick said. There was no answer from either of the Rosens. Look, he said reasonably, we have no conflict of interest. It's important to me that the Voight-Kampf test functions, almost as important as it is to you. The elder Rosen said, she's not an android. I don't believe it, Rick said. Why would he lie? Rachel said to Rick fiercely, if anything, we'd lie the other way. I want a bone marrow analysis made of you, Rick said. I can eventually be organically determined whether you're an android or not. It's slow and painful, and admittedly, but legally, Rachel said, I can't be forced to undergo a bone marrow test. That's been established in the courts. Self-incrimination, and anyhow, on a live person, not the corpse of a retired android, it takes a long time. You can give that Voight-Kampf profile test because of the specials. They have to be tested for constantly. And while the government was doing that, you police agency slipped the Voight-Kampf through. But what you said is true. That's the end of the testing. She rose to her feet, paced away from him, and stood with her hands on her hips, her back to him. The issue is not the legality of the bone marrow analysis, Hilton Rosen said huskily. The issue is that your empathy delineation test failed in response to my niece. I can explain why she scored as an android might. Rachel grew up aboard Salamander 3. She was born on it. She spent 14 of her 18 years living on its tape library, and the 9 other crew members, all adults, knew about Earth. Then, as you know, the ship turned back a sixth of the way to Proxima. Otherwise, Rachel would never have seen Earth. Anyhow, not until her later life. You would have retired me, Rachel said over her shoulder, in a police dragnet. I would have been killed. I know that since I got here 4 years ago, this is the first time the Voight-Kampf test has been given to me. In fact, I rarely leave the building. The risk is enormous. Because of those roadblocks you police set up, those flying wedge spots to pick up unclassified specials and androids. Eldon Rosen added, although naturally the public isn't that they're not supposed to know that androids are on Earth in our midst. I don't think they are, Rick said. I think the various police agencies here and in the Soviet Union have gotten them all. The population is small enough now. Everyone sooner or later runs into a random checkpoint. That, anyhow, was the idea. What were your instructions, Eldon Ross asked, if you wound up designating a human as an android? That's a department matter. He began restoring his testing gear to his briefcase. The two Rosens watched silently. Obviously, he added, I was told to cancel further testing, as I'm now doing. If it failed once, there's no point in going on. He snapped the briefcase shut. We could have defrauded you, Rachel said. Nothing forced us to admit you mistested me, and the same for the other 9 subjects we selected. She gestured vigorously. All we had to do was simply go along with your test results either way. Rick said, I would have insisted on a list in advance, a sealed envelope breakdown, and compared my own test results for congruity. There would have had to be congruity, and I can see now he realized that I wouldn't have gotten it. Bryant was right. Thank God I didn't go out bounty hunting on the basis of this test. Yes, I suppose you would have done that, Eldon Rosen said. He glanced at Rachel, who nodded. We discussed that possibility. Eldon said then, with a reluctance, this problem, Rick said, stems entirely from your method of operation, Mr. Rosen. Nobody forced organization to evolve the production of humanoid robots to a point where we produced what the colonists wanted, Eldon Rosen said. We followed the time-honored principle underlying every commercial venture. If our firm hadn't made these progressively more human types, other firms in the field would have. We knew the risk we were taking when we developed the Nexus 6 brain unit. But your Voight-Kampf test was a failure before we released that type of android. If you had failed to classify Nexus 6 android as an android, if you had checked it out as human, but that's not what happened. His voice had become hard and bitingly penetrating. Your police department, others as well, have retired, very probably have retired authentic humans with underdeveloped empathic ability, such as my innocent niece here. Your position, Mr. Detector, is extremely bad morally. Ours isn't. In other words, Rick said with acuity, I'm not going to be given a chance to check out the single Nexus 6. You people dropped a schizoid girl on me beforehand in my test. He realized this wiped out. I shouldn't have gone for it, he said to himself. However, it's too late now. We have you, Mr. Deckard. Rachel Rosen agreed in a quiet, reasonable voice. She turned toward him and then smiled.